The campaign against Measure 6C is called to keep our libraries. And we should probably start with what Measure 6C does. It is a proposal that was put on the ballot because petitioners brought signatures to say that a library district would be good for a certain area that is outside of Boulder and inside of Boulder. So it says we'd like to form a library district, and the library district will have taxing authority. 3.5 mils will be the tax rate that every property within the district boundaries will be assessed and pay every year. For the first year, that's about $18.8 million. And the library district would be governed by folks appointed by the city council and the county commissioners. And then there's another component of that, which is the library facilities, which are currently in Boulder, will be in some way transferred or leased to the district. So generally, the question for Boulder voters in this district boundary, which is bigger than the city of Boulder, but smaller than Boulder County, I won't draw the map for you, is do you want to make this change, yes or no? And I believe that the answer should be no. It will be better for the libraries and better for the community if we do not. So if you want to go to the next slide, please. There's three main reasons why I don't think this is a good idea for Boulder right now. It increases the money going to library district by much more than I think is appropriate. The treatment of the 100 years worth of assets that Boulder has accumulated within the city for its libraries would be very uncertain. It is unclear exactly what arrangements will be made and whether those will be good or bad. And then the governance proposed is really inadequate. It goes from being governed by an elected body of Boulder City Council making decisions, elected leaders, to appoint a library commission, and the two of those jointly oversee the library. It would go to only appointed and no electeds over the library district. So we can go to the next slide. So the bottom blue line is the operations budget of the library as it's been for the last through 2016 through the proposed budget in 2023. This does not have the arts budget or capital included. This is simply the operations cost to run the library, the people, the books, and all the insurance and everything that must go along with it. The dotted red line is the budget as proposed by the library district. So it is quite a big jump in the amount of money going from taxpayers to pay for the operations of the library. If you go to the next slide, this shows the library budget on the bottom, which is operations plus capital. And so you'll see that the blue line now has this big bump in it. That big bump is the money that was spent building the North Boulder branch of the library, which will be opening up in about a year, I believe. And the 2023 library budget, which is that last point, is the proposed budget that's being discussed right now. That has the operations for the North Boulder branch included in it. So I showed you these two slides because the red dotted line is still the amount of money that the library district is asking for. And when you look at all of this, it seems like an awful lot of money to me. You want to go to the next slide? So what will this mean to the people paying the taxes? So the numbers we're using here are the numbers if you're inside the city of Boulder. So if you're inside the city of Boulder, there's two components that are being voted on. One is this big one, do you want a library district or not? Another one is within the city right now, there's a dedicated tax at about 1/10 the rate the library district is talking about, 0.33 mils. And that tax is up for removal. So Boulder voters get to vote on two things, one of which is, do you want this library district? And the other of which is, if you want the library district, do you want to get rid of the property taxes you're already paying to the library district? And presumably the answer to that is going to be yes. And this is the net cost if that's removed. So about $23 per $100,000 of property value for a homeowner in Boulder. And it'll be a little more if you live outside of Boulder because you won't have that property tax being removed as well. If you own the home, you're paying all that nut, of course. And if you're a renter, how much of this gets passed through to you depends pretty much on your landlord. It could be your landlord's charging strictly market rate, and then it probably won't change because it's what the market will bear. or your landlord is charging you based on their costs, this is definitely going to increase their costs, and they may pass that along to you. So we're going to go to the next slide. What I think is really, of course, of great interest to this group is what will it do to businesses. And just because of the way Gallagher works, Gallagher Amendment rules propagated down to us from the state that say assessment rates for business are 4 times higher than assessment rates for residential properties. And what that translates to for you, if you own a business here in Boulder, is this new measure will add $92 per 100,000 in valuation of your property. So if you have $1 million property, it's 920 of additional new taxes, no new services, but additional new taxes for the library. Tenants in the business case are likely to see 100% of this pass through because most businesses have triple net leases, like I had for dozens of years, and that all comes through to you. So anything that you see here will come through to you. If you're outside of Boulder, it might be a little bit higher. I'm going to go to the next slide. So governance, only appointed members will be on this governance board. So we don't know what the removal requirements will be if somebody's got malfeasance going on. We don't really know anything about it because that's all to be determined. We have an idea of the number who will be appointed to this board and who will do the appointing, but how they'll be removed, who they are, and our understanding is they recommend their own replacements to the approval bodies, the city council or the county commissioners. And my big gripe with this whole thing, I have to say the library champions and the people advocating for this have done a fantastic job of process. They have told everybody what they're up to, and people have commented on it. It's gone through the city council multiple times, and then it went to the county commissioners. But the only thing that hasn't really been talked about in context is how does this affect the tax appetite for other things? Like there are many needs in the city. And one of the nice things about having a library and among fire and police and all the other services the city provides is you can balance what's going on now. With the library district separate, dedicated tax, it will be all of its own. If the needs change, the balance of tax needs in the community change, there'll be no way to remove this other than going through a vote that's just about this. And so this takes up valuable tax appetite. So I find that wastefulness around this subject is taking away from elsewhere. And then there's too many unknowns. I mean, I hate to say it, for all the process that has gone into this, there's just way too much that's TBD at this moment, like the governance issues in particular. Go to the next slide. So then that's the summary. I think these are the most important points. I've kind of given you a sense of how much it's going to increase. So there's a dollar component, but I also don't think that this is really good governance in the sense we don't know exactly what we're buying into. And we don't know exactly what we're buying into for how the assets will be handled. These are community assets. I have no doubt that the people on the library board will be devoted to keeping the library in good shape. But should something bad happen, or should you end up in a situation where you have to dispose of assets because you need cash, that uncertainty all has to be anticipated in the transfer negotiations. So I just think that this is not needed and it's not wise. And I would turn to you for any questions you might have.
So before we go to questions, we'll get through the remainder of our presentation.
Okay.
Okay.
You bet.
And make sure everyone gets their word in. But next up is the former mayor of Boulder, Leslie Durgin.
Another one.
Who, I believe, mayor from 1989 to 1997, if I remember correctly, overseeing everything from the NOAA building to the John Ramsey murder. Some tumultuous times, but led us with a steady hand. And so with that, we're here to talk about 6F, or excuse me, 2F, which is CU South. So when you're ready, feel free to take it away.
Thank you. Former mayors don't die, they just get resurrected in other ways. So if you help me click through the slides, thank you. And as I start, I really want to give credit to Sam Weaver because these are his slides. And I stole it. Yep, kind of in the middle
Just
there.
slide up.
Yeah,
Keep going.
Couple more. All right. We'll just hop over some.
Yeah, we'll just
No.
hop over.
No means no more delay is the name of our campaign, and we are advocating against the referendum 2F and for the continuation of the annexation of CU South. Assuming all of you know where that is, but just in case, as you come down Davidson Mesa, CU South is the property right as the road levels out off of 36. It's off to the left, and we've seen that sign, home of future students in CU South for, well, since probably 1996, because that's when the university acquired the property. Want to hop over? Thank you. This is Sam's slide presentation. You might recognize it.
You good?
Okay, the next one, there you go. So there have been three major reasons why our campaign is advocating for the continuation of annexation. Back up a bit, in 1996, the university bought the property. The city of Boulder declined to purchase it. And so the university bought it, didn't know what they were going to do with it. In September of 2021, the council and the university came to an agreement after quite an extensive negotiation to annex the property to the city. Annexation basically provides water and sewer and public utilities, and it's an opportunity for the city to get some benefit, which we believe it has done remarkably well in exchange for annexation. So a group of citizens advocated successfully to get enough signatures to have us vote on this issue again. City Council approved it in 2021. The citizens of Boulder said we want to continue with this annexation, November of 2021. And here we are, November of 2022, and we get asked the same question again. We're hoping that you will all vote against the referendum 2F and vote in favor of continuing the annexation. Why? Three major reasons. Flood safety, significant benefit in our community through the annexation will provide flood safety for a large portion of our community. We get open space, which we currently don't have on that property, and we'll get attainable housing. Let me tip through some of those. Flood safety. University CU South is 308 acres, and basically it's divided into 3 zones, which I'll go through in more detail. One is the open space zone. The second, and we'll focus on that first, is the area that will serve for flood control for the downstream neighbors. Where are those? Fraser Meadows, the retirement community, the whole Fraser neighborhood, and Keewatin, which in 2013 were significantly impacted by the flood. This will provide needed flood protection for that section of town. And then there's a development zone where the university can build. Okay, next slide, please. 60 acres of this 308 will be devoted either to flood detention, so that either is the flood infrastructure, walls and levees, or 24 acres that are recreation fields for soccer and lacrosse, that sort of thing, which in a flood would actually be a retention pond for the water that could then flow across 36 if we didn't have flood protection. Of the 308 acres, 119 will be available for the city to acquire for city-owned open space. Although people in this community use the property as open space, walking dogs, bird watching, whatever, it's not open space. It is university property, and they have been very generous in allowing that use. This would enable the city to acquire 119 acres permanently for a city open space. And that leaves 129 acres, less than half, for university development. So I think the university has been remarkably generous in giving benefits to this community in exchange for annexation and the opportunity to secure public utilities. Flood protection, I've talked a bit about, but let's go through the next one, please. Thank you. Some quick truths, because there's an awful lot of myth floating around out there. There will be flood protection for 2,300 community members and over 1,000 dwelling units. I've told you where that part of Boulder would be protected. I will tell you, because I'm on the Fraser Meadows board, that in 2013, in the flood, which the water poured across 36 into the neighborhood through Fraser Meadows Retirement Center. And we have video literally of people who were being carried out, senior citizens, people with Alzheimer's, carried out of water that came up to here on me in a flood. That is what we're trying to prevent ever happening again. There is no development in the floodplain. The opponents would have you believe that Williams Village 2 is going to be built in the 500-year floodplain. You can't build any structure in the floodplain. There's no negative downstream impact. You cannot protect a portion of land or property by putting the water into your neighbor's yard. So that is not allowed. And finally, and very importantly, Sheriff Pelle knows this all too well, the evacuation and emergency access and egress to Boulder is critical. The first responders in the flood in 2013 could not get to Fraser Meadows because the water was pouring across 36 and Foothills Highway. And as a community, we need to be able to get out in an emergency, as we saw in the Marshall Fire, or first responders get into Boulder to help us in a critical event. And this is essential for the flood control. No development in the floodplain I've already talked about, so let's go on to the next one. Environmental benefits are significant here. This used to be, as many of us will remember, gravel pit. And so up to 40 acres of what used to be mined area will be restored to wetlands. 119 acres of the floodplain will be preserved and restored for wildlife and environmental protection. We get some water for restoration from the Dry Creek ditch, and outdoor lighting and noise mitigation on open space, strictly controlled. So there are tremendous benefits environmentally for this. And I think I'll skip over all, but Sam understands this better than I if you really want to get into the detail. 2,500 tons of captured carbon from the restored wetlands. So it really does have a big environmental impact, not just for the land itself, but because of climate change. Housing and development, third major benefit from this annexation. The community, all of us, will get between 100 and 150 units of permanently affordable housing for people not associated with the university. And the university will build over 1,000 units for faculty, staff, and upperclassmen, no freshmen, allowed on that, graduate student. So people can both live and work on that site. The housing priority, housing has to pay come first, and it's built at a 2-to-1 ratio. So while the university is interested probably in classrooms, research labs, etc., housing has to be built at a 2-to-1 ratio to address the impact of housing costs in Boulder that particularly hit faculty and staff, and of course students and many of us. I think the only thing I'm going to focus on here, because I want to go quickly, is the height limit. And so for those of you familiar with the property, there's a neighborhood called Majestic Heights that's up on the hill that looks out to the east over this property. Any development that is close to that slope has to be 35 feet or less. And then out where it turns into the lower valley, they can go to 55 feet elsewhere. Those are the requirements in Boulder. And the university has agreed it will abide by all our building codes. Transportation, major issue and a lot of concern from people, particularly in South Boulder. There'll be connectivity for bikes and pedestrians, both under 36 and connecting to trails. Some controversy about an entrance to this property from Highway 93, which we all think of as the road that goes to Golden. That will be an entrance only in the case of emergency. You never want to have a neighborhood that has only one way in and one way out in case of a disaster. They will have bus routes and of course all sorts of activity allowed by the university through its alternate modes of transportation, just like Williamsville, which will be there. And here's a major piece. The vehicle trips will be capped. We've never done that in Boulder. So in a neighborhood, they actually were going to measure the number of cars that go in and out. And if they exceed the cap, they have to pay a penalty. So it really is the strictest traffic management in the city of Boulder. It's going to be very interesting, and I'm confident, very powerful to see how it works. Quickly, 2 drafts of this agreement were released to the public. The attorney is not very happy, but City of Boulder is pledged to be open and let people see it. It is a legally binding agreement. That means that the university and the city have to live by this. It has the power of a contract, and if either side violates, you can imagine the lawsuits that will occur. And it was not negotiated in a dark room. There were nearly 100 public hearings on this negotiation. So it really has been vetted significantly by the community. So in conclusion, flood safety, talked about a lot. Open space, we get it. We don't have any now. We'll get 119 acres of open space and attainable housing, both for university-related people and for the community. So we are hoping that you will support us in voting no on 2F, which means we continue the annexation, we continue work on flood safety, and we do not overturn the work of the city council, the university, and the community in negotiating this deal. Thanks.
Thank you very much. This is actually a perfect segue because the next issue we're going to be covering, we're going to go from local to statewide, but actually focus on affordable housing. So this is Proposition 123, and I'll be presenting on this one, even though I didn't write it. But Proposition 123 was done through a petition signature gathering effort across the state of Colorado, and is the first attempt at creating a statewide affordable housing ballot initiative that ideally will be successful.
Sorry.
We'll see if the PowerPoint will be successful as the, there we go. All right, we can go to the next slide now. So for those of you who don't know this, I don't think it's any shock or surprise, but the analysts have looked at this. Experts actually declared an end to affordable housing in Boulder County. 60% of residents here don't even earn enough to live in our community. You go to the next slide. So this was actually a really interesting thing to me, but in Colorado, we've actually built 40% fewer units from 2010 to 2020 than the previous 10 years. And at the same time, we've actually seen home prices double. So you've got this squeeze that's happening at the same time, and voters are listening. 88% of Coloradans have actually identified housing as a cost of housing as a serious problem. So this cuts across all demographics, cuts across age, race, income level. It's a very telling statistic. We can go to the next slide. So this is where the Boulder Chamber Board got very interested. Is we want to make sure that Boulder is still an attractive place, not only for businesses but for employees and employers to reside. But you know, statewide, when more than half of Coloradans say they can no longer afford to live here, we definitely have a problem. So we go to the next slide. So how do we do this? How do we solve this problem? So instead of raising taxes, the proposal here is to take 0.1% of the existing income taxes happening in Colorado, put it towards a dedicated affordable housing fund, which will raise close to $300 million. You know, some people go, "Oh, what about my Tabor refunds? You know, is that going to affect that right now? We all got, you know, a $750 or $1,500 check in the mail." The answer is yes, but not by very much. Right now, you can see that $300 million is less than 10% of the projected Tabor refunds. So we're talking about $75 or out of your $750 check. Not a huge amount of money. And what do we get in return? Building up to 10,000 houses a year, giving local governments the control that they need. This doesn't create rent control. This doesn't create new mandates, but provides new carrots as opposed to sticks. And we can go to the next slide. So where does it actually go? How does it actually work? And I know these two are kind of hard to read, but I will read it for you. So there were two main areas where the initiative really identified where the money should be coming from and going to. So the first one is Colorado Housing Finance Authority, CHFA. They essentially work as a lending institution, but their goal is not profit. Their goal is to reinvest those dollars right back into affordable housing programs and social good programs. So there are two things that CHFA will be responsible for. The first one is land banking. If you have spent any time on the Western Slope, cost of land is astronomical. You've actually literally got hospitals and school districts building affordable housing right now for their teachers and nurses. And so if we can dedicate some of those dollars towards land banking, it gives you the opportunity to hold on to that land for a certain period of time so you can get the plans ready to go because we know the cost of land is going up. The second one, we all talk about the missing middle, right? Workforce housing. These are folks that are earning somewhere between usually 80 and 100%, 80 and 120% of area median income, still can't find a place to own, live, rent, you name it. Then the division of housing is sort of taking care of the bookends. First one is addressing homelessness. We hear about this in Boulder a lot because it's in front of us, right? This gives a certain portion of those dollars towards alleviating those homeless issues, those homeless needs, transitional housing, and other things. But on the other side is home ownership, and really providing families with the capital that they need, either from down payment assistance or other programs, to ensure that that our workforce can actually afford a place of their own. So we can go to the next slide now. So our Community Affairs Council really took a look at this, and this is the one thing that really stood out to me on this issue more than any other issue that I think we've seen. We've had over 150 organizations endorse this ballot initiative. This is everything from the Colorado Bankers Association to the Colorado Wyoming statewide NAACP to labor unions to Habitat for Humanity. So you've got bankers and developers and civil rights organizations all standing on the same page saying, yeah, this is something that we need to do. The other thing that we want to really focus on is the fact that this provides any city or county that wants to take advantage of these $300 billion has to agree to expedite their planning process. If you are a developer or worked in real estate before, it takes years to develop housing, even more to develop affordable housing. Time is money. And so it's saying to our local governments, if you can commit to this, there's a financial commitment to make sure that this works for your community. We can go to the next slide. So I'm going to close on this. You know, it's not so many times you can see a fiscally sound policy that happens that creates a new program without raising taxes. That's a pretty fortunate thing that we've got. The other thing is big plans that are put into our state law shouldn't be in our Constitution. They could have baked this into the Constitution. Instead, they said, you know, look, if the situation on the ground changes, if the economy tanks or the economy goes gangbusters, we want to give our legislators the ability to ramp this up, speed it up, tweak it, slow it down, whatever needs to happen in the meantime. And as we know, affordable housing continues to be one of the biggest pain points that we see in our community. And so this is the first opening salvo at creating a long-term solution to this problem. So with that, I think that's our last slide, and thank you. So our next presenter We're going to go from affordable housing to wildfire and emergency services. So this is County Issues 1A and 1B. We have our Boulder County Sheriff Joe Pelle with us today. Joe has been our sheriff for 24 years now? 20 years. It just feels like 24 after the last, for 20 years, one of our longest serving sheriffs, obviously seeing a whole bevy of issues, especially over the last 10 years. But he calls 1A and 1B his swan song. I think we haven't heard the last from him yet, but Joe, Sheriff, take it away.
Thank you. After the Marshall Fire, the interest in fire mitigation down here on the flats, the urbanized area of Boulder County, grew exponentially, and there's actually quite an outcry for fire mitigation, fuel reduction, hardening of neighborhoods, hardening of homes, building of escape routes, purchases of equipment, staff to manage that, staff to manage all the different land ownerships that are involved in doing landscape level mitigation, keeping our communities safe. We know that when we have a fire, and especially in our county, all of our major fires in my tenure have been wind-driven events. The only thing that we can do to get in front of those is to get into mitigated fuels and reduce flame length, and reduce ferocity, and that's our only chance. So 1A is a small tax on sales tax. It's a penny on $10 and would fund ongoing mitigation efforts. We have a lot of fire mitigation efforts like county open space and city open space, the Forest Service. It's all on forested lands. It's all up in the mountains, basically. It all involves projects, one-time projects, and it's not long-term in perpetuity kind of planning and reduction of that risk. So that's what it's all about. It came on with a ton of citizen demand, so it came on very quickly. We worked with fire districts and cities in particular to craft this. And it's, again, it's a penny on $10. It's not a huge tax. It is a sales tax. The next one that I'm here to speak in favor of also has to do with emergency response and emergency services. It's 1B. 1B is also a 1 penny tax on $10 in the first 5 years. And then after that, it reduces to half that amount. So it's ongoing as a maintenance fund. So here's the situation in our county. We have a lot of really well-funded fire districts and ambulance services down where there's a lot of population density, a lot of homes, a lot of sales tax and property tax values. The area I'm responsible for providing search and rescue and emergency services for is from here west to the Continental Divide, and all the way from Monks Peak over towards Rollinsville. And all those areas are staffed by small volunteer fire departments, and all of our search and rescue is provided by volunteers from Rocky Mountain Rescue, Boulder Emergency Squad, Front Range Rescue Dogs, the Mountain Search and Rescue Team. They're all volunteers and they're all getting there, but we're off running calls, a couple hundred a year, over 200 this year. And they're running onto land that is publicly owned, off of the tax structure. So the National Forest, County Open Space, State Forest Service, City Open Space, Rocky Mountain Rescue. I got a building for them with a federal grant a number of years ago on 1.2 acres on East Walnut, and it's an old metal building. Used to be where they fixed mail trucks. In fact, when I was going through college on the Marv Service Scholarship Program, I used to tow the postal trucks in there. But, we want to put a modern building on that for them. They can't right now. They can't park all their equipment. So they have snowmobiles and ATVs and SUVs and that kind of thing sitting out in the snow and the sun. We want to build them a modern facility, a large headquarters building for them, the 70 members, so they can have training, meetings, put all their equipment away and that kind of thing. That's why this is loaded heavily on the front end to pay for that capital project. And then after 5 years, it will reduce to more of a maintenance fee. What I propose to the county commissioners and what they've agreed to is to essentially appoint a committee, a governance committee of subject matter experts, fire chiefs, or appointees from the different rescue groups to oversee that fund, to hear requests for equipment like ropes, training, insurance, and SUVs, and trucks, whatever they need to do their job and do it well, and to treat that essentially like a grant program and fund those things for those groups so that they're not funding them out of pocket or holding. I've been to a lot of bake sales and pancake dinners, you know, these groups, these small fire departments and groups trying to raise money to fund what they do for the people in our community. Folks down here in the urban area are going up there and keeping them really busy. So this is why it's proposed as a sales tax, so that we're all sharing that burden to come to fund what they do for us up in the urban or the rural mountainous areas. So I'll wait till questions.
All right. Well, so before we go to issues from 1A to 1B to 1C, one of the things I'll just say that the Chamber Board really took a look at here is when you have hundreds of millions of dollars going into our economy from the tourist industry, this is one of the opportunities that we have to say, yes, we want to work on wildfire mitigation because we understand that you can't enjoy our pristine water and our mountains if they aren't there. And two, hikers have been known to get stuck. Not looking at anyone in this room right now, but hikers have been known to get stuck, and Rocky Mountain Rescue is largely an all-volunteer run outfit. They are experts, they are saints, but they deserve the infrastructure that they need, the communication materials that they need, the technology to be able to help people. And beyond the human issue, it really is a focus on ensuring that when people come to work here, when people come to recreate here, there's that opportunity to do that. Also, this is paid for through sales tax. So our tourists are actually helping fund the services that we're getting. With wildfire mitigation, one of the biggest tax anchors in the city of Louisville, Target, is only now in the last month coming back online after the Marshall Fire. So once again, when you think about a 0.1% sales tax going from our economy to protect our economy, is a great return on investment. But speaking of great returns on investment, next up we have Amanda Mansfield. She is with Boulder Transportation Connections. For those of you who don't know, Boulder Chamber, the Boulder Transportation Connections have merged now. BTC is a phenomenal organization that works on all sorts of transit options for our community. And if you had a hard time getting here in traffic, after BTC has been with us for another year, I swear that will be over. So I have a habit of making promises that Amanda can keep. So with that, when you're ready, Amanda, thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much, Jonathan. So that's absolutely correct. As of next year, there'll be no more traffic. So
Nice job.
yeah, you know, aim to deliver.
The chamber delivers.
So thanks for having me. Today I'm going to speak about ballot issue 1C, which is being put forth by Boulder County, and it would continue the current 0.1% sales and use tax allocation that the Boulder County Planning Department and Transportation Planning Department would use to fund the implementation of their transportation master plan. First, I'd like to say that the Boulder Chamber Board and Community Affairs Council is taking a position in support of 1C, which again is the continuation of the 0.1%. But I'd also like to point out that the CAC and the board are very enthusiastically in support of Boulder County proposing in the future, perhaps in a near-term ballot cycle, an even higher allocation, so higher than 0.1%. And the reason that's so important is that right now there's an unprecedented level of federal and state funding that we have easy access to that would allow us to fund just a whole amazing universe of multimodal transportation projects that we've never had the opportunity to fund before. There's just so much money coming in. So that'll be available now and in the near future. But for now, we are promoting the continuation of the 0.1 sales and use tax allocation to fund the Transpo plan It's not a tax increase, it's just a continuation. And before I get into all the cool things that it will fund in the county's transfer plan, I want to point out why this is so important and tied to the chamber and community economic vitality. And the reason is that to have a truly effective transportation system, it has to be regional. It has to be about regional mobility and regional accessibility, and particularly for historically underserved groups. So that would be low-income workers, essential workers, shift workers, et cetera. And a very tangible way that we can all see that a really effective, sustainable, easy to use, affordable transportation system is tied to local economic vitality is that it enables employers to have an easier time attracting and retaining employees. And so with that, I will move into the specific items in the transportation master plan that this continued allocation would allow the county to fund. So why is it needed? As I mentioned, it allows the implementation of the transportation plan to happen. I will point out that if we don't vote to continue this current allocation, it'll run out in 2024, leaving the county with very limited options. So that leads us to what would happen if it isn't passed. So that means that the county would unfortunately just be able to maintain their current infrastructure. They wouldn't be able to invest in all of the awesome transit and accessibility and mobility shuttle services that they currently oversee. Their trail system work would be reined in. And just really, they couldn't realize this beautiful multimodal vision they have in their transportation plan. Next slide, please. So here I'm going to get into more details about what could be funded if this 1C is moved forward. So you see on the right-hand side up there, you have safety work on roads. That's key. It's the base of our network. We need our roads to be functioning. But as I mentioned, mobility and accessibility, particularly for underserved populations, is a big focus of the county's transport plan. So you see here a lady being helped out of a via shuttle. You see Ride Free Lafayette, an on-demand micro transit shuttle. So these are the kinds of transit services that the county can continue to provide and expand upon if we continue funding. Also, super important is the great work they do on these regional bicycle and pedestrian corridors. We all love them, we all use them. And there's lots of exciting things being planned moving forward, such as the Colorado 7 and the Colorado 119 bus rapid transit and bikeway corridor work. County's involved in that. So continuing that funding would allow them to help us continue mobility for our non-choice riders, our dependent riders, and bike infrastructure as well. Please continue. So going back to mobility for a second, we're talking about subsidizing passes for people who need financial assistance. We're talking about travel training, helping people figure out how to use the transit system. We're talking about equity programs like Earn a Bike. So if somebody does a bit of volunteer work, they can earn a bike. A great program to help people who don't have other options get around. Bicycle Friendly Driver, which helps car drivers learn how to share the road with vulnerable users. And of course, as I mentioned, they operate all sorts of great regional transit services. So it counts for that as well. Please continue. So as I mentioned, road safety, that's a key part of this. It's not just all bike and pet and transit. So we're talking about filling in missing links for shoulders on major corridors. We're talking about flood resilience, creek restoration, really key safety improvements for bikes, pets, and car users at high traffic intersections with dangerous conditions. And we're talking about mountain road repair. So making sure that people can travel to and from our more rural areas safely. Next slide, please. And on to regional trails and bikeways. So they're, in this transportation master plan is a vision for how to complete the entire network of trails. And the 0.1% continuation would help them move towards that vision. And so that includes both like hard surface, on the road bicycle lanes that we all know, as well as off-road multi-use paths separating bikes and pets from cars. Next slide, please. Sorry, no worries. And so just to revisit again, such an important service they provide, particularly for our dependent riders. You have on-demand service. So if somebody needs extra special help, getting to a medical appointment, they can call this on-demand transit service and provide them with an essential service. It's also great because it's recreational shuttles for those of us who don't have cars, who want to get to Hesse and hike, or want to get to all sorts of different trailheads and hike. This is a great opportunity for that. and cuts down on vehicle miles traveled. And as I mentioned, here's some great examples of transit services they operate: Climb, Lions, and Flex. Please continue. So this just shows you, going back to the point of how important it is to have a transportation system that really pays attention to being a regional network and making regional connections. This shows you some of the major corridors that the county pays attention to. So I mentioned earlier Colorado 119 and Colorado 7, and the county's role in the bus rapid transit and the bikeway planning that goes on there. And I'll just mention, speaking of regional transportation and how this a good transpo plan has to think regionally, it's so important in this particular region because, as mentioned earlier, we have a serious housing affordability issue. And so a significant number of our workers have to live outside the region and commute in. So again, it's so important that we think of them, and that's what the county's doing in trying to provide amazing bikehead regional routes and amazing transit routes that cover the cities up and down these major corridors. Next slide, please. So I'll end with this. This slide basically shows you what we're asking for, which is this guy right here, continuation of the 0.1%. And it shows you what could happen if in the future, the county was able to successfully move forward in a future ballot cycle with an even higher percentage ask. So right now, if we agree to continue the funding, they can stay in operation, they can do basic infrastructure projects, they can do more than just maintaining what they currently have. So they can do their base projects, which includes transit, bikehead facility work. But if we were to decide to allocate more in the future, they could do so much. They could work on, or they could implement rather, fare-free transit, which is a big deal and a really big driver to getting people on transit. They could make significant contributions to Northwest Rail. That's a big deal for this community. They could totally build out the bus rapid transit network, which is so important. Full subdivision paving, which is important as well. And they could really do a lot to help municipalities fill those funding gaps. And I'll just mention related to that, again, there's so much money available right now just waiting for us. So if we are able to move in the near future to a higher allocation in a future ballot cycle, there's a lot of money out there. But currently, it's a great opportunity for us to just extend the current 0.1. It's not a tax increase. That's what the CAC and the board is supporting. And that's the end of it. So I'm happy to answer any questions you might have. Thank you. And feel free as well, if you want to reach out to me about the whole ending traffic thing, I'm happy to about that. Yes,
Before we go to questions, let's have one more. We are in the home stretch though. So I'm glad we've got the inquiry minds here. So last but not least is issue 5A. This is through the Boulder Valley School District. So I believe the 2014 Boulder County voters, or Boulder Valley School District voters, supported a tax increase on their ballot. The Boulder Chamber also supported that in 2014, but needs are changing. We are in a new decade now, and we are facing new issues. We can go to the next slide. So here are the new issues. Really three things. One, aging facilities. I don't know if anyone's been by New Vista High School. It was built about 100 years ago. It's getting older. And what that means is we need to invest in making sure that that building is safe, it's secure, and it's providing the right kind of learning environment for students. Second thing is overcrowding. This may not be directly related to the city of Boulder, but in Erie, we have a school that is at capacity right now, which means that students will be literally learning in trailers unless there's new opportunities to build the right kind of capital infrastructure. And last but not least, and I'll go into this a little bit later, but it's career technical education. We know that the 21st century workforce is going to look different than the 20th century workforce. And what that means is creating new ways to make sure that our students are ready to work in the new economy. So we can go to the next slide here. So what does this mean? This was a bit of a shocking number to me, but if you look at the percentage of buildings that are over 40 years old, over 60% of them are over 40 years old. I'm also over 40 years old. Did some renovations at this point as well. So I can relate to this slide really well. We'll create a ballot for you. All right. Well, the good news is I don't need asbestos abatement. Some of our schools do. We'll go to the next slide. So once again, if you take a look at this chart here, you can see that the projected enrollment over the next 5 years, especially within the town of Erie, is far above our 100% capacity level. So we'll go to the next slide here. There we go. This is what I find to be the most exciting and most relevant part as it relates to the Boulder Chamber. The Boulder Chamber is affiliated with the Boulder Economic Council, which works on workforce issues. The Grad Plus program is something that was created in part by the school district, but with a lot of input from our Boulder Economic Council and our workforce development plan. What this does is you've probably heard of putting students on different tracks, right? You're going to be a blue collar worker. You're going to go to graduate school. You're going to go to college, right? The truth is this can all be on a spectrum. To that student that is, set on becoming an aerospace engineer, getting their master's degree, going to work for Ball Aerospace, great, that's wonderful. For that student that wants to become a auto mechanic or airline mechanic, that's great too. What this does is it says you don't have to pick while you're in high school. We're going to put you on a spectrum of opportunities, and if you want to stop and join the workforce as soon as you graduate and make a great living, we're going to give you those tools. If you want to do concurrent enrollment and start taking college classes now to work towards your aerospace degree, we're going to take those same skills that you started out learning as an auto mechanic, we're going to apply those. But you can't do that without the right infrastructure, the right buildings. These aren't just seats and chairs in front of a lecture hall. This is hands-on work that needs to happen. And so what this will allow is not only college credit, but industry certifications and work-based learning opportunities. So the students are actually getting out there in the field, learning the job as they're, and doing the job as they're learning the job. So we'll go to the next slide. The last part that I'll mention, just in case people are wondering, this is a 3.5 mil levy. As the 2014 mill levy is sunsetting, this will sort of come in to replace that. You've already heard about what a 3.5 mil levy looks like, so I'm not going to go into that. But what I am going to say is this is what it looks like in terms of where the money is going to be spent. The last little slice of the pie, and this really goes into the one thing that I'll close on here. The last slice of the pie here is improving ADA accessibility. One of the major focuses of the Boulder Chamber now is diversity, equity, and inclusion. And part of DEI includes ensuring that every student has the same opportunity as any other student. And when we have playgrounds where students in wheelchairs can't get to the playground, that might sound like it's a small deal, but play is how kids learn, right? And so these are things that we are making in investments in building a stronger community across the board. We'll go to the next slide here. Here's why the Boulder Chamber landed in a slightly different place on this issue as opposed to the library district. You're looking at a mill levy increase. Once again, businesses pay a disproportionately higher tax on that. First of all, Boulder Valley School District has a AA+ bond rating. What does that mean? They can invest more of their dollars into building as opposed to interest. They're also number 4 out of 176 school districts that were ranked here in Colorado, meaning that we have a high record of not only fiscal management, but programmatic success. And they showed great work with their previous ballot initiative. They built 5 new schools. They opened up preschool and kindergarten spaces. They created enhanced security. So this demonstrates we want to reward the people that can show a great return on investment, and this is a critical need for our future workforce. So we'll go to the last slide here, and I will just close on this, is that we are very lucky to live in this community, not just for this ballot issue, but all the ballot issues that you've seen. We are very blessed to be part of not just beautiful mountains, but wonderful people who are doing the right thing every day. And the question is, how are we going to invest in that next generation to make sure that the opportunities that I got when I was in high school in Boulder can continue? So I hope that you've enjoyed your experience here. Before we go to questions, the last thing that I'll invite is our CEO and President, John Taylor. If you have anything you want to add or come up and say.
Sure.
And we are going to allow plenty of time for comments and questions, but I do want to just, first of all, thank our panelists and our staff team for their advocacy on behalf of issues that are very important to our business community, but the community at large. Second, I just will recognize our Community Affairs Council and our Board of Directors that put a great deal of thought into balancing all of the issues in support and in opposition to these different initiatives, and they landed in a place that they feel best represents the needs of our businesses, our economy, but our community at large. And so that's the filter that they went through and the deep thinking that they did in terms of thinking through these policy issues. But finally, I'll just say, most important, we put this program together because we want to make sure that, listen, you out there in TV land, and you and the audience, may have a different perspective on these issues. That's totally fine. But most important, we want to make sure that you're informed, that you take the time to understand the policies and the different pros and cons, and that you get out and vote. That is absolutely critical. So fundamentally, a message from this organization is be engaged, educate yourself, and then get out there and vote on these issues. And again, thank you to our panelists. Thank you for the audience who showed up and those online, and very much to my great team of folks who